So drones offer a non-destructive evaluation method for us, and it's a quick and easy tool to use in the field. But this area down here is still being reflected, so that would typically mean the wood chips have decomposed, and we need to add more wood chips before we get these weeds from coming back. The cost for drones have definitely come down, but everything that I've presented on today, I've learned by actually doing.
This same bed in which was 3 seasons after it was planted. This was in springtime. You can see it's getting a little bit bigger, and more prominent colors are coming through. So that when you do receive those drone maps, you're able to sort of review it, analyze it, and have a visual scan before accepting anything. So when I accession the plant and I go now to the map, I can actually see the plant on the map, like whether it's a tree or even a decent sized shrub.
So hi everyone. Thank you so much for making the time and joining us today. I'm Jamie, and for those I've not met before, I cover growth and marketing at Hortis, and I'm also joined by Havard, who's our CEO and founder, who many of you I'm sure already know. We're really pleased to be hosting another webinar. Today's topic does feel especially timely because drone mapping and aerial imagery have come up quite a lot in recent conversations with the gardens that we've been speaking with, particularly when we were at the APGA conference in San Francisco earlier this month. So today we'll be looking at how drone mapping can support garden and collections management, from understanding the wider landscape to documenting change and making aerial imagery more useful day to day. So just in terms of running order, we'll hear a little bit from Havard shortly, but we do have a couple of quick poll questions just to get a sense of where everyone's at with drone mapping. After that, we'll hand over to Nick Coelho from the Bermuda Zoological Society. And Nick will share his perspective on using drone mapping and aerial imagery across their landscape. And then lastly, we'll try and leave some time at the end just for some Q&As. So with that, I will hand over to Havard.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jamie. I just also want to sort of, just put a bit of a reflection on maps in general, and why maps are so great. It sort of gives you a different perspective, basically, on your collection, and that's why we also have spent a lot of resources to see how we can improve how mapping can be consumed and utilized for collection managers. And of course, the drone maps are making it even more interesting and fun. So there's a first law of geography. This is not the first law, but this is more like an interpretation that when you look at a map, you can see adjacent plants. You can't see those kind of spatial things when you look at a spreadsheet. So those kind of things it's basically a complementing way of consuming and engaging with your collection. We're just going to run a quick poll just to get a sense of who has joined us this morning. So Jamie, if you wouldn't mind rolling the poll, and then we'll give you a few minutes to answer those questions. And you will see that you can scroll down. So you get first question here: how familiar are you with drone technology? And you have one option to answer that. And we'll share this with you when we're finished. And then the next question is, what's your garden's current relationship with drone technology? We'll just run this for a minute, or hopefully not too complicated questions, but and then I would like to hand over to Nick to share his presentation.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. All right. So my name is Nick Coelho. I am in charge of the Bermuda Zoological Society's microforest project here in Bermuda. And we use drones pretty heavily to do a bunch of different tasks. And it saves us quite a bit of time, but also our resources as well. So I'll be going through the use of the drone technology that we personally use. I'll touch a bit of the basics, go over a little bit into deep of what we use it for, but also how we could start to use it in your gardens as well. So the Bermuda Zoological Society is the support charity for the Bermuda Aquarium Museum and Zoo, which is a government-run institution. Our shared mission statement between the two is to inspire appreciation and care of island environments. And we fulfill this mainly through our habitat exhibits, our environmental education, our conservation projects, and our research programs with our visiting researchers and our local researchers as well. One of the major conservation efforts of the BZS is this microforest project. About 90% of our landscape in Bermuda is filled with these invasive plant species, and we got here through a variety of different ways, but mainly through the blight of our endemic Bermuda cedar forest. So our method is it's a novel approach to try to reforest Bermuda with native endemic plants in high densities. So these are tiny forests that are springing up across our 21 square mile island, which are aimed at restoring biodiversity and to help fight the climate change. We often put them alongside our schoolyards, alongside roadsides, public parks as well, and just degraded landscapes or brownfield sites. The method is based on the Miyawaki method out of Japan, and it's observed through mainly mimicking our natural forest. And they are typically maintenance free between 3 to 5 years. We plant everything from our canopy layer, our tree layer, and then our understory and shrub layer all at one time. So everything is getting planted in high densities in one location at one time. Some of the benefits that we have seen is a huge increase in biodiversity, sequester of carbon, helps provide shade, also helps to improve our water and air quality, increases our green spaces, and helps prevent erosion. So far, we have 29 sites all across Bermuda. It's just actually over 105,000 square feet right now of managed planted areas that we have restored. So since 2021, this project has planted over 7,500 native endemic plants across the island. We've had over 7,200 hours across all of our volunteers. The project is supported by over 23 donors currently, and it's a huge impact, not only for our environment, but also for our education and our school kids. We've removed an estimated 167,000 invasives off of the degraded landscape since 2021. And this is where our drones come into play of how we start to use them. So drones offer a non-destructive evaluation method for us. And it offers us the potential to enhance our understanding. And it's a quick and easy tool to use in the field, which provides rapid data, usually within minutes. And if you're creating a map within hours. It's also an alternative model for us, so we can apply it in our forested areas. And we're also started to bring AI into the equation. So training this AI algorithm up to identify invasive plants and native and endemic plants as well. Almost like a Zillow for trees, if you will. So what is drone mapping? Typically, we fly the drone, we process it, and we use it. So the drone flies a plant pattern, typically a grid pattern, at low altitudes. So these take a series of images that are then uploaded to a processing, either a computer or a cloud-based software. And this software then stitches those photos together. This is called an orthomosaic, or is a stitching of these photos together, also called photogrammetry. So they match up shared features to create a single map of the planned plan. Our uses, it is a highly accurate zoomable image. You can use this in ArcGIS, GIS tools, Hortis, and other platforms, and allows you to do data manipulation as well. So our output for this drone map is an orthomosaic. So this is a photorealistic georeferenced image typically accurate to sub-centimeter accuracy if you're using PPK or RTK, which we will get into later, but typically between 1 to 2 centimeters when it is properly done. So why are botanic gardens different than a traditional drone mapping situation? So some of the challenges that we are facing in our botanic gardens and other planted areas is this dense mixed canopy. So these trees overlap each other. It creates confusion with the drone software. So the stitching also could get messed up because the cameras can't see through some of these trees. Wind is also a big challenge as well. So if you have or flying it on a windy day and you have all these trees moving, that movement of the trees will skew some of your data a bit, and the output of these trees may not be as accurate as it can. We could see fine detail, so we could see the labels, pathways, beds, signages, for instance. Visitor and staff usage is another one. So you could can distort. If people are moving around, you could have shadows and different artifacts in your images. And the height difference between our open, long, and tall trees can create some issues as well. So what does this mean for you, the vendors, or for the flying operators? Single grids typically won't cut it for botanic institutions and botanic gardens. Although it is an agricultural default for fields, there's not a lot of movement or tall trees in fields. Standard resolution for the agricultural side is relatively low. This is between 5 to 10 centimeters a pixel. It's good for fields, but gardens need much more accurate and higher resolution data. The common overlap settings is about 70% and 70%. Of 80 and 80 is ideal in my opinion. And botanic gardens, typically 85 and 75 works, 80 and 80 works. But as you start to increase that overlap, you not only increase your images, but your time to process those images and the time to fly the drone. So if you're limited by batteries, this could be an issue. Ground control points, it depends on how accurate you want your data. Ground control points can be useful for the botanic gardens, but not really useful for fields. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But drone maps and plant records. So how can we use our drone maps to help us to improve our plant records? We can create a better base map than regular satellite data. So this is a higher resolution orthomosaic. So this gives everyone in your institution the same accurate and up-to-date image of the garden, which typically satellite data, especially for us, is inconsistent and is typically outdated. Visible pathways, beds, garden beds, and boundaries. So you could see these more visible, easier for you to assign and correct in your spatial software. Visual confirmation, so you could see a plant's location against the map and compare it to your GPS points. It's not just a coordinate paired to this map image. It's actually something that you could tangibly use. And different comparisons between seasons. So multi-seasonal comparison. So flying in different seasons not only reveals the changes in the garden, but changes in the trees and the health of the trees as well. So specifically for Hortis, you could upload this as a background layer, pin it to your accession records, you could use it to map and visually audit the records, what you see. You can update those plant locations easier as the collection changes and grows in real time. And these seasonal maps allow comparison across multiple years on the same platform. So mapping under and around Canopy can present a bunch of issues. So open areas and pathways are really good. The drone excels here. It's the same uniform image. 1 to 2 centimeter pixel resolution is most likely achievable pretty easily. Really good for navigation and bed identification. However, when we start to move onto the canopy and dappled areas, there is some occlusion. So there's partial visibility underneath the canopy that you could get. Double grid pattern is highly recommended so that these overlaps reduce the artifacts and the gaps in your map. And seasonal timing also could play a factor into that. For dense understory, this is where those very expensive LiDAR drones can be useful for you. I do not have any usage of a LiDAR drone. They start at about 60,000. It is a very specialized drone and may not necessarily be needed for what you need for the understory. But typically, drone cameras cannot see through the dense closed canopy. So this is where your GNSS and satellite data could also play a factor into it, into a broad sense.
Just to add one to that slide, Nick, I was thinking about those who live in the tropics. Of course, there's canopy most of the year. Yeah, it's quite hard.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're in the northern or southern hemisphere, where there's at least more seasonality, there's some Goldilocks moments, I guess, when the
When the
trees
leaves
are
fall off.
budding, when the canopies are not there yet, so you can actually do some very good drone footage. But that's sort of probably a short point in time that you might need
Yes.
to pay attention to. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
So how do we get quality results from our vendors if you are asking a separate drone operator to fly your area? Ideally, 60 to 40 meters above ground level is the kind of the gold standard. You want a ground sample distance of 1 to 2 centimeters per pixel. Ideally, a double grid. A single grid can work if there's not a lot of buildings or changes. It also depends on your batteries, how many batteries you have. Front overlap, I would say 85 is kind of the gold standard, but you can get away with 80 and 80% for front and side overlap. Ground control points can be useful, but it takes a lot of time to set up. You cannot move these ground control points because it's a reference point for every time you fly this drone. So they can take a bit to set up, may or may not be useful for your situation. You have to weigh the pros and cons for that. Relative accuracy versus absolute accuracy is kind of an example for that. There's different processing softwares, so it depends on your situation. We personally use Drone Deploy. It's a cloud-based software. We don't need to buy an additional expense for a computer, a license for that computer, and the storage. When you think of creating multiple maps, for us, we have almost 4 terabytes of data since 2021 for these maps. One map can easily be 150 gigs for that single flight. So storage can become an issue. This is why we use a cloud-based software. But there's multiple different softwares out there. Agisoft Metashape and Pix4D is probably the gold standards. DJI Terra is useful. DJI Terra is useful, but it's another additional cost as well. You just have to outweigh the pros and cons for your situation. Some of the deliverables that you could get out of this is not only Orthomosaic, but this accuracy report. So you could see your measurements, are they within a threshold that you are looking for, and then you could change that as well. But point cloud is another one that you get out of it. But what we are really looking forward for the BZS is not only the Orthomosaic, but the accuracy report, but also plant health data. So we'll get into that a little bit later. This is a report that what you will get out of the softwares. This is a Drone Deploy specific one. So you have not only your project name, the engine that's running on, the data, both processes and capture, but our main point I want to look at right here is our ground sample distance. So 0.45 an inch is relatively good for us. Our DEM is our digital elevation model. So this is it over here. So this provides insights into how the elevation was calculated. And ground sample distance is the threshold of how much data you're collecting. It's based mainly on the drone height. So the lower the drone is, the more ground it will cover and capture. But that also increases your processing time, your flying time, and the batteries. The batteries are your main kind of limiting factor when you're flying. Our next really important one is our average GPS trust. So this is using a multispectral drone or DJI M3M, which has an average GPS trust of 0.10 feet. So that's within, I think, 3.5 centimeters. So we're getting really, really high accurate data. And this is where the RMSME or root mean square error of this comes into play. So really, really low, which is exactly what we want to see. It just shows you how accurate that the data you're capturing is. So we'll go into a little bit of ground sample distance. So ground sample distance is the size of one little pixel on the ground. So 1 centimeter represents each pixel 1 centimeter on the ground. 5 represents 5. 2 represents 2. And so imagine zooming into a photo. If you're having it very, very low, small pixels equal more distance. The higher you are, large pixels equals less distance. Really dependent on your height above ground level and the way that you're flying that drone. So why should botanic gardens care about this metric? So at 1 to 2, you get the ability to identify very, very small plants, seeds, garden bed signs, and irrigation features. The higher you go, the less you're able to distinguish the different layers. So in the key words is the lower that GSD is, your higher your detail, more photos, longer processing, and larger files. Some of the use cases of how we use drones at the BZS is not only to map out our areas, but to help us to plan out and plant those areas, long-term monitoring of the sites. Our education is really, really important for us at the BZS. So we involve, not only our students from planting these microforests, but to also flying the drones to help us monitor as well. And lastly, for our conservation and research, we have visiting researchers that visit us every year. So we have them down, and there's a very amounts of ways we use the drone. One of them is mammal studies and whales. So looking at the migratory patterns of whales, identifying whales from their fin flukes, and then also helping visiting researchers who are down tagging spotted eagle rays. So we're flying the drone, finding out where these animals are in the water, and then directing these researchers to section off this area so they can capture this animal, to put a tag in, and then release so that they could get this important data. Some of the outputs that we get, so yes, not only high resolution photo and video, but really accurate elevation and terrain data. Using a multispectral drone, we could then get plant health data as well. On your software side, most every software that's out there, you're able to calculate the area, the surface area, length, slope, vertical length, cut and fill, volume. The list is pretty endless. Your multispectral drones give us plant health analysis. So this is typically NDVI, which we use here. We could see our tree canopy and biomass estimation. We're able to then input this data to do terrain and surface modeling. We could also import this data to do carbon sequestration and monitoring, but also time changes over tracking over time. So this is an example of how, when we create a map, we want our overlap. So each image, 70% of that image is retaken. So it allows that software to then be able to stitch it a little bit relatively easier. When you get into more enterprise level drones, we get into real-time kinematics. So RTK, in short, is a satellite navigation technique that allows you to enhance the accuracy of the GPS and the GNSS stations. And it provides a more accurate centimeter level precision by correcting the GPS location in real time of the drone by using the space station. So in short, you pop the drone up, it has a module on it. This module connects not only to the space station, but satellites in the sky, and it corrects itself in real time. An example of a map. So this is our Bermuda Botanic Gardens right here. We've drawn our boundary box. This is our 3D grid format. So if we did not have that 3D grid format, it'll be just one singular line versus the parallel as well. So parallel and longitudinal lines are the best for getting the 3D image of what you're looking at. We also use it pretty heavily to plan our microforest areas. So this is an example of cow cane that we have locally. This is a degraded site full of invasives. So I pop up the drone, I fly the area, I map it out. I could then create a specific planting plan for that area. I could import that image to ArcGIS and then create a map about it. And then I go through and I hand label each individual location for these trees where I would like it. We fly it again after we clear off all the area of invasives. This is about an acre of land that we have cleared off. We have added mulch, and then you can see the plants here just before we're about to plant it. And then this is it after 230 plants have been in the ground. So we still have a while to go, a big section left that we will plan to start planting up at the end of September when the heat here in Bermuda has subsided. This is our image of our botanic gardens in Bermuda. We actually have a mycoforest right here, but this is a zoomed out map of that area that I actually collected yesterday for this presentation. So we'll talk a little bit about the mycoforest in the botanical gardens. So this was a derelict building that we then had been approached from the Parks Department who wanted to do a coronation garden for King Charles. So he was getting coronated. We decided that this building, which was a derelict building that hasn't been usable for like the last 10 years, to knock it down and then have this flat concrete pad to then transform into a mycoforest. So I then popped the drone up, create a map. I create a specific planting plan for that area. And then in one day, I probably will never do this again, but in one day we planted 520 individual trees, shrubs, and ground cover. We had 43 volunteers from our first sponsor come out, and this is it 2 months after we had planted it. So as we start to, as this forest starts to grow, we track not only the changes of the growth rate, but also monitoring the invasive pressures that come up as well. So this is it about 3 years after we had planted it. You can see just how dense it is. So with this new multispectral drone, it allows us a new way that we could use a tool to identify problem areas in our mycoforest. So these vegetation indexes are mathematical formulas which allow us to use specific image bands to assess our plant health. Each band represents a different wavelength. So the multispectral drone has a near-infrared camera, a red edge camera, a red sensor, and a green sensor. And each band corresponds to a different part of the spectrum. So we see in the visible light, everything from red to blue, while these pick up different plant health metrics. It's basically a way that we could create a formula out of these different bands. If we had RGB data only, so a regular picture camera, this will be the approximation of the formula that you would use. It can be useful for a quick and easy measure, but is not as accurate as if you had a multispectral data. So NDVI, normalized difference of vegetation index. This is the gold standard of assessing chlorophyll content in the plants. It's a value between -1 and +1. And the higher the value, closer to 1, indicates a healthier, denser plant of vegetation, while the lower will suggest pest damage, stress, drought, or sparse plant cover. There's different metrics as well that are usable in different situations. The agricultural drones really use a lot of the soil adjusted vegetation index and the OSAVI to correct reflection of that soil to look at crops specifically. This is an example of if we use an RGB data and basically put a filter over that to understand plant health. I could see, a nice green portion. I could see a little bit of green on here. I could see a red part, but it's very hard to distinguish what exactly I'm looking at. Now, if we then take our multispectral data, we can see exactly where there's a nice dense population of Jamaican dogwoods up here, a little bit of buttonwood down here. But this top corner, I should say, is sparsely, it's either weeds or it's not enough wood chippings, or it could be soil. So then if I use the optimized soil index, I could then say, all right, This area now is green, so that means that it is still covered with wood chips, but this area down here is still being reflected. So that would typically mean the wood chips have decomposed and we need to add more wood chips before we get these weeds from coming back. So can aerial imagery help identify plants? In short, yes, but it takes a very trained eye to identify these plants. Plant identification can be tricky enough in person and on the ground. Now you're adding in aerial features for it and looking down, it becomes a whole different ballgame. So yes, it can help distinguish broad and different growth factors. So your tree layer, shrub layer, ground cover, and canopy. You could identify very distinct species with the difference in that chlorophyll and different color signatures, different texture as well, and different shapes. You could narrow down which accession those are based on some of those features, but it does take a trained eye to assist and to actually identify them correctly. Multispectral can help, but it is specialized imagery, which you need to kind of have experience in to help identify different issues. Some of the limitations that you can face, species level identification is tricky. Canopy plants, subcanopy plants cannot be easily distinguished sometimes without the leaves off of them in the winter, or unless you use a LiDAR drone, which is very expensive. You will require specialist processing and expertise beyond the standard mapping software and drone mapping. And then they are AI-assisted imagery tools, but it is still a very new area of research. So I could go into one that we are using, but it is still new technology. This is Jennings Road. This is our first microforest plot that we had created back in November 2021. We use our NDVI analysis pretty heavily at this location, and I will show you in this image. In this image, the health of the plant. So on our left is a nice, healthy Bermuda palmetto. This is our endemic palmetto. This is actually before a hurricane. So leaves are nice and green. There is a little bit of reflectance, but that is mainly the stems because the stems are brown, so that gets reflected. However, on the right-hand side is 2 days after a hurricane that we had last year, and the red damage the red that you see in this image is damage from wind and from salt penetration from that hurricane. So it allows us to easily identify issues and then to correct them in real time. And this is shown in the multispectral image before it is visible to the naked human eye. So we're able to detect these diseases and issues faster than if we were using a regular RGB camera. We're also able to distinguish between invasives and natives. So on the left up top here by this pathway, these are 2 Bermuda palmettos. And then at the back right here towards the right bottom corner, we have 2 Chinese fan palms, so an invasive palm that is in Bermuda. We are also training an AI algorithm to identify native endemic plants on Trunk Island, which is our educational classroom for the Bermuda Zoological Society. So what we do is we take the drone, we pop it up, we have a map that it flies, we then take all these still RGB data images. I then have to manually annotate those images in the software. So I train it on what it needs to know. So this is the identifying labels for them. I then run it through the software, which then highlights some of these areas and then gives me a percent confidence interval of what it thinks that plant is. But it is only as good as the data that you train it on. So if you misrepresent that data, say you misidentify something, you're going to be feeding it wrong information. So it's very important to kind of identify what you are feeding it correctly. But that in and of itself is a skill to identify aerial plants, well, plants from aerial images, I should say. Yeah, that brings us to the end of that. I do have the drone software up that I can share as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Nick. There's a lot of so we will with the blog article we add some more details on a lot of acronyms and amazing cool technology. But let's do the show the drone deploy first and see. Have a look at that. Looks really exciting.
So it may be a little bit laggy on the screen since I am sharing it, but this is that map that I flew yesterday. It's about just over 1,000 images that helped us to create this this model. So right now this is in 3D modeling mode. So we're able to see, for instance, we're able to see the general area of these trees. This is a good example of how they could be kind of skewed when you're doing the 3D imaging. But if we view the map in 2D, this is the satellite data, and then this is the 2D image. So really easy identify that this is a pine, a Norway pine. But this allows us not only to create these base maps, we have different, different calculations we could do. So we can map out our area for the front lawn here. And since this image has already, well, these images, this Orthomosaic has already been processed, and we used RTK on it. When I measure it, I know it is down to within 3 centimeter accuracy. So we could do an estimated area, we could do estimated surface area, we could do varying lines, so we could see slope, we could see distance, we could see our horizontal length as well. So there's a varied amount of tools baked into the software already. It is web-based, so it is accessible even from your phone. So there's different trade-offs between a physical dedicated computer to doing those orthomosaics versus the cloud. This software requires subscription. Well, most softwares require subscriptions, and based on your different tier of that subscription, you have different benefits. Drone Deploy in specific does not limit you for the amount of files you can store. They do limit you for the amount of images that you could upload for creating a map, and I believe that's caps at about 3,000 right now.
But again, thank you so much, Nick. You have an infinite amount of knowledge, it feels like, around this topic. And a lot of and I guess this topic can be extremely what should I say, granular, and there's no end to details. So
yeah, so everything that I've learned about drones, I've actually learned on the job doing it. So while it may feel intimidating to start, I would definitely suggest even just a small little drone for your hobby if you want to just, understand how they work, how they use. The cost for drones have definitely come down. But everything that I've presented on today, I've learned by actually doing. So it is possible. It is easy to learn when you are doing, I feel, when you actually physically could hold it and understand it. But yeah, thank you once again for everyone for coming out. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to both of us.
And then we'll head over to Naz at Mayfield Gardens, who will share her perspective on using drone maps and aerial imagery across their landscape.
My name is Naz, and I work as a plant record manager in Mayfield Garden in New South Wales in Australia. And so before I go into the drone mapping aspect of the talk, I will just talk a little bit about the garden itself. Mayfield Garden is a privately owned property owned by the Hawkins family, and that started as a 2,000 acres property of farmland. And then this was many years ago, 25 plus years later, this was developed into an ornamental cool climate garden that spans about 160 acres of the whole property. The garden area itself is almost 2 square kilometers, with a perimeter of 6.3 kilometers around. So you can imagine the vastness of this garden and having it quite a large collection of plants that we have here. This was the map that we have, and this was basically generated by the software, the CAD software. That's what was used before we start using Hortis. This map is from 2024, and it basically it shows the whole garden as a whole, but not as much detail as you would see from other things. And we introduced Hortis for our botanical record in late 2024, and this was with Hortis we were able to use digitized maps. And to start our journey, we started using the Google satellite, as was advised by Jamie and Hortis staff, and that helped us get going with Hortis at the beginning. But it was definitely difficult to be able to locate the plants on the map. And also we didn't have accurate GPS devices to basically assign accurate GPS coordinates to the plants that were being accessioned. I was also unable to draw the garden beds accurately, especially when it came to multi-layered beds, and also beds that were under, canopy trees and things like that. It was at this point that Jamie from Hortis, he mentioned using drone maps as an alternative, custom map layout that we could use in Hortis for improved accuracy, and as well as having a much better visual impact. And this was to use as a base map in Hortis. So what does the default map looks like in Hortis? This is one of the layers of the default map. So you can see it's just this is from there, and you can see some outlines of the beds and things, but can't see any more than that. The satellite, this is the Google satellite map, which is what we started off with. And you can see a little bit more. You can see the boundaries of some of the beds if they're big enough, and some of the walking paths and roads. But the vegetation is more like a green blur, which you cannot distinguish between plants and trees or shrubs, things like that. It was at this point that we wanted to sort of look into a drone maps and see what that's about. So what is an aerial map? An aerial orthomosaic or orthomosaic map is a high resolution bird's eye view of an area of interest that's captured by a drone. It is a highly detailed, geometrically corrected aerial map. The map is created by stitching hundreds or thousands of drone photos together using specialized softwares. It is geo-referenced such that each pixel aligns with an exact coordinate on Earth, and often the aerial maps are used in construction sites for more accurate information, in agriculture for monitoring health plans, in surveying, and also in emergency response. In our case, it was for using it as a base map for a big garden, as well as we wanted to look at some seasonal sort of aspect, which I'll just move on to that slide now. So why did we opt for the aerial map? In our case, we did want a sharper and more detailed map to use and complement that with Hortis for our botanical record. and it was also to get accurate geolocations of our garden beds as well as the plants. And also, there's a lot of work or construction work that happens in Mayfield Garden, where there's constantly there's expansion and new garden beds, new infrastructure being built and carried out. So having a photographic record of this construction and landscaping work was also an important thing to have, to start having, and for our records. Also, ease of navigation and throughout the garden and locating plants for staff, especially new staff. So with a garden being so big, it is quite hard to sort of get used to how to navigate around it, especially if you're new staff, and also being able to locate the plant that you're talking about, and communicating it with your staff. So having an image that reflects the true status of the garden was helping in this case as well. Having a top view versus ground view perspective, it really gives a complete experience both for staff and for visitors when you see the garden from both aspects, both perspectives that way. And last but not least, with the having a seasonal aerial maps where we could highlight the transitioning of the garden between the seasons. It changes so much, as you will see in the next few slides from the images that I will provide, how the same area can change over the seasons. So here I have the screenshot of the aerial map that was taken in winter 2025. So this is the map. It's basically covers the same area that I showed you earlier from the Google satellite map, but it's a bit more detailed here. Obviously, because it was winter, and we have a lot of deciduous trees and plants where most of the leaves have dropped. All these white fuzzy things actually represents our deciduous trees. So it's just showing the basic structure of the garden. You can see clearly the beds, anything that's evergreen, shrubs in between. Yeah, so this was what our first map. Then this same area in spring map, this is exactly the same area, same resolution. And this is where the garden is actually coming to life with all the colors and the leaves and everything showing around. So you can see also you can distinguish the vegetation and plants much better in here. So that was a quite a big transition from the winter to spring here. And then this is the most recent map we have. Has not been uploaded into Hortis yet. We are still trying to finalize and fine-tune the final product, but basically this is what that same area of the garden looks like in autumn. So the big contrast in colors that the plants display during autumn, and this is well shown on a drone map, which you wouldn't be able to see using any other type of map, really. And also you can still see if areas are, the plant areas are looking healthy, established or not. So it's handy like that. And then this is an example for a bed that was basically, it's an existing bed that had plants in there, but we needed to revamp the whole area. So all the plants were stripped out, and that bed was redesigned with the purpose of having plants that were more frost hardy and drought hardy and complemented each other well through the bed. This was planted in late 2024, just as we started using Hortis. So this was my very first bed to sort of learn and experiment with Hortis at the time. And you can see these small dots as quite the plants were only newly planted, so they were still small. You can still see that, different patterns and how it was planted across. This same bed in which was 3 seasons after it was planted. This was in springtime. You can see it's getting a little bit bigger, and more prominent colors are coming through. And this same bed now, or more recently, this was done in May for the autumn map. And you can see that the plants are well established since their planting. They're also expanding and starting to show the design that was initially, done to make it look this way. And so this is how, in this particular example, it shows the progress of a bed as it starts from the new planting and how it progresses over seasons, and how it establishes. So that's one way of us using these drone maps as well. Then, as I mentioned earlier, that we have a lot of projects going on in the garden where lots of new beds and garden beds are being generated and created, just to add more, things to the garden. This is construction site 1 here, which we plan to have new beds around the lake and plant lots of ornamental prunus trees. The idea is to have a display of flowers during the springtime, where they'll all be showing, the prunus flowers happening around that time, and as you go through around the lake, that should be showing there. So this is taken in winter time, just as the project started. I think there was some work being done on the side of the road there. And then moving on to the spring map, there's more work that was done up just above the lake here and on the side of the road, as you can see. And then the next and the most recent one, more areas have been cleared around the lake. These beds are being, scraped to basically create a new garden beds. And once this is finalized, we'll have the plantings happening. So this is a progress of how a project is exactly, how the project is progressing over time, and it gives us a better idea of different from top view for how it's happening. This is construction site 2. In this one here, we are planning to have an area for a wisteria arbor that will be about 150 meters long, which I believe it might be one of the longest arbor in Australia, or maybe in the Southern Hemisphere. I'm not quite sure, but definitely in Australia. And so this was before it starts, but we knew it was going to be somewhere along there. And then this is a progress that's happened after that, a season after that, in springtime. Part of that is being dug and showing the structures in there. And then this is the most recent update on that part of the project. There's more area being dug and it's expanded until we have that whole thing ready for the wisteria arbor to be completed. So these are all different ways of making use of the drone maps and having these, photographic records of your projects as time progresses. Now, moving on to our challenges that we faced, I think one of the challenges that we faced was familiarizing myself with the aerial imaging gardens, and also being able to know and understand how to use at least software such as QGIS, so that when you do receive those drone maps, you're able to sort of review it, analyze it, and have a visual scan before accepting anything. So that was one of the challenges. It's something definitely possible, but it's something that would be very handy to do as you do. Other challenges is the weather. If you, you need the right weather, something that is not too wet or something like that. If it's sunny, again, it can affect the flight and the images. Other things like being windy. If it's too windy, it can create motion in your canopies and trees, and then that will actually distort the images taken by the drone map. Also, if it's strong wind, it can cause turbulence for the drone map when in flight, and that can also affect the images that you get. So these are things that should be really sort of looked at before booking or doing anything, going ahead with it. The other thing is time of the day for the drone flight, things to think about. Basically, as I said, if it's a sunny day that you picked, and it's very bright, it's gonna if you do it early in the morning or later in the afternoon, it will create a lot of shadows. And if that's something you don't want to have, you want to minimize shadows in your map. So on a sunny day, something like around the midday, anywhere between the 11 to 2 o'clock mark, to minimize shadows there. So that's also another thing to keep in mind when setting up a date for the drone flight. Another thing was the file size. So the very first map we received was 60 gigabyte. So that was fun, downloading and uploading these files. It would take a couple of days before you have the full thing. Not to mention that QGIS or probably any other mapping software would crash with a file so big like that. So keep in mind when you do get a vendor or a provider is to be specific about the file size being small enough, easy to load into Hortis without causing any issues or anything like that, and easy for you to download and upload into different platforms. Also, in Australia, there are laws regarding flying the drones around people. And with our garden being opened to the public every day of the year, except I think Christmas Day that we close. So it's really hard to find, a day and where you close it to the public. It was something that's not what the owners want to do. They wanted open regardless, but it was trying to find a day with minimal people around, visiting around. We do have busy seasons, especially when it comes to springtime. It's a busy season. Autumn festival is a busy season, so it is hard to find that right time to be able to fly the drones and not breaking the law there with having a lot of people around in the garden. So that was that. So things the company should consider that you hire is sudden changes in altitude. They really need to consider how the property, whether it does have changes in altitude and how big are those changes or how sudden are those changes, because that essentially affects the flight height. And you want to keep flight height consistent throughout the whole map or the whole area when you want to take it. The other thing is changes in vegetation density. I think, as Nick mentioned in his presentation, dense vegetation areas, it can confuse the drone camera and being able to, capture the area well. That way, as mentioned earlier, the weather on flight day, ideally overcast and no wind. Speed of the drone, that can also affect how clear the images turn out to be. And as Nick mentioned earlier, 70% overlap of flight paths. Otherwise, if you don't have enough overlap, when you try and stitch some of those photos, you could end up with a gap and it will look odd or warped or something like that. So minimum of a 70% overlap is really important to achieve when doing drone maps. And again, be aware of the file size. Now, the larger the area that's mapped, I think this is something more personal that we experience, because the Mayfield garden is such a huge garden compared to other gardens that we've seen, with having 160 acres that you want to cover all that well. So having the larger the area mapped and the higher the resolution that you want, and the more geospatial data that you want to incorporate into the file, the larger the file will be. So I think keeping this to a minimum and yet getting the best map for your need is important to work this out, to have a fine balance between these aspects there. And it is also important that the company or the provider is aware of distortions, seam lines, and blurry patches, to basically take the measures beforehand to avoid these issues, but also be having softwares that are able to solve these issues if they do come up. And also the type of the drone for the job. So depending on what you want the drone for, whether it's for plant health or whether it's as a base map for what we use, it will dictate what type of drone you will require to get. And these some are equipped with RTK technology for accurate geolocations, and things like that. So these are all important factors to take into account and ensure that the company is aware of these when they do the map for you. So before accepting a final product or a final map, it's always good to do a visual inspection of your file and look out for things like blurry patches here. So in this example here, I've got, you see, this is quite clear, crisp showing, and then it is like a band of a blurry patch here that's going and it's fuzzy looking. So these things that you need to point out. Distorted areas, so what this looks like is being like warped or dragged, and this could possibly be a result of change in speed or change in height during flight, sudden turns. Other things, seam lines, so you can see there's a line, and this usually results from bad stitching. So when they were trying to stitch the different, multiple images, that sort of generates that kind of line like that, where it shows this. Moving on, another one is poor overlap. So this is important when you're doing it with Google, because we in Hortis, you have the EPSG pseudo-Mercator format in order to have it as a reference, to refer to as a reference. And you can see this is the Google map showing this line here, and this was from the drone map. And they're not quite superimposed as well as they should be, which means that I'm probably, from what I calculated before, was about 8 meters or something out. So when you're doing your accessioning and you're assigned a geolocation, if you started with Google and then I add my drone map, my geolocations for the plants will be in fact outside the bed altogether, because it's not matching. And that means you'll have to go through each single one of them and reassign the position. So to avoid this, before you accept your map, make sure it superimposes and overlaps well, or as close enough as possible to the Google map. And then just in summary, so basically, orthomosaic maps provide a high resolution map of an area of interest. It can be used as a historical photographic record of how certain progress, certain sites or projects progress over time. It's also better inspections of areas of new landscaping projects. And in our case, it's a seasonal map highlighting the changes in the garden that takes place through the seasons. Seasonal maps also provide a true reflection of the garden for customers during the time that they visit. So take home message: familiarize yourself with QGIS software or any software, any mapping software. Know the purpose of your aerial maps. Decide on a resolution that works best for your needs. Ensure that the provider you hire is familiar with orthomosaic mapping, and ensure the provider has the right drone for the job. And also ensure that the final file format is compatible with Hortis and small enough to cause any issues, and perform a thorough visual scan of the map before accepting the file. And that's it. So this is the most current map we have of Mayfield. This is basically covering all the garden, and that's how big it is here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Naz. That was extremely exciting and wonderful to see how you've applied drone maps here, and especially I love the seasonality. This really tells a fantastic story. So it's really, really, really interesting.
So Margaret had asked, she'd said that, so Margaret from Tambourine had said she was interested in how drone mapping could help improve mapping with Hortis. Hopefully that's kind of been covered during today's session. But Naz, if you have any sort of further insight that you wanted to just say how particularly it's helped within Hortis?
So within Hortis, yes, it's helped tremendously for us, as I mentioned, I think earlier in the presentation. So when I accession the plant and I go now to the map, I can actually see the plant on the map, like whether it's a tree or even a decent sized shrub, and I no longer have to sort of guess a GPS coordinate for it, as I was doing at the beginning before we have the drone maps. So now I know that's the plant that I'm accessioning, and that's where it is on the map. So it saves me that guesswork from trying to work out where approximately on the bed, the garden bed, it may be, as compared to looking at it from the ground level versus when you have it on the computer or the laptop or something like that. So it has helped in that sense, where I'm able to locate that, the plants just there and there. The other thing, you can also accession your things if your maps are up to date and you know what plants you've got where. I can actually accession these in the office without even having to be there. If it's a rainy, wet day or something, I can just accession it and then later on go to that location and take photos and add photos to the accession that I generate. So it comes in handy that way as well. Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Naz. And then just quickly, I think we've had a question from Zane asking, our botanic garden in Coffs Harbour is near an airport. Would 100-meter ceiling be sufficient for drone mapping?
I think we could. I think we should. Well, if you know, Naz, I don't know. Nick will probably be able to answer that question, but yeah.
Yeah, I think our maps were done. I know that the first two maps, the winter and the spring map, were done at, I think, somewhere between the 70 to 100 meters above ground.
Perfect,
And as Nick mentioned, the lower to the ground you do, then the kind of less area you cover, which means then you have to go do more flight paths to cover the thing and more time to put in. The higher up you are, the more ground cover you cover in the one image. It is a fine line between what resolution you want to achieve, but I think the 100 meters is a good sort of height for what we do. So we did get it, I think, around the 70 to 100 meters for the drone map, for the first two maps that we got.
Then there was a question from Vanessa: does Hortis update their maps at all? So we just supply those maps that are well, not cumbered by any additional costs. So these are free maps supplied by Bing and OpenStreetMap. And those OpenStreetMap you can actually draw yourself. You can update them. They work a bit like Wikipedia. And with the Bing satellite map, you are at the mercy of their whenever they decide to update their map. So we don't do any updates of anything. But there is. I'm just going to add a link to that question here, where you could see how you can add other free maps and add those into Hortis as well. So you can look at that support article. It's called "Add New Base Maps for Custom from a Custom Map Service" on our support channel. But yeah, we don't update the maps ourselves. So that's why people also get. I've one garden who had well, where the Google Map, or was it Bing, who had. They had basically for a year they watched their garden where there's a wedding on, so they had all big constructions and everything else going on in the middle of their garden, so they weren't happy. So then when you have a drone map, you obviously have control over whatever you get photographed. So that's a good thing. Yeah. So one question I have for you, Nick, is when gardens use products like Hortis and others, where you basically give access to these free aerial maps like Google and Bing, and sometimes in some areas they are known to be somewhat inaccurate. So, and then if you then get a drone map and you just switch between them, and then you see that the drone map is, maybe there's a bit of a shift there. There might be then a sort of an inclination to try to correct and use Google as your reference point, but
Yes.
maybe not a good idea. I don't know. I suppose the starting point is you need to know how accurate your own map is before you start considering any of those things.
Yeah, so the satellite-based mapping is not as accurate as a dedicated drone map, is what we're finding locally in Bermuda.
Yeah.
That data can be skewed as well, even in between maps. If you're flying the same map, this is where ground control points can become useful. For ground control points,
Ground control
the
points,
setup
yeah.
for that can be costly. And if there's any movements on those points, you have to remap those ground control points. So you could still tie these maps in and correct it in, like, say, ArcGIS, for instance. That's what we do. We input the satellite data, we input our data, and we see how accurate it is and compare the two. 9 times out of 10, that drone data is going to be more accurate than the satellite data. That's, for us, our last satellite flyover from the government was, I believe, in 2012. So a lot has changed since 2012. So we're finding that the drone maps are very accurate when we are specifically mapping out those plant locations with our GPS points as well. I see there's a question about, do you have any tips or experience flying under canopy? Bermuda in general, there's about 4 or 5 canopy species, native canopy species. We are kind of in a predicament where we don't have our main canopy species, which is the Bermuda cedar. It has been replaced by an invasive called Brazil pepper, and that typically tops out around 30, 35 feet. Our cedars could get upwards of 60 feet. I do have a little bit of experience flying probably under some of those trees, but it's not like a forest as you are in either North America or Europe. We don't deal with trees that are, hundreds of feet high. So we're kind of in this weird kind of limbo where, yes, we could fly under the canopy, um, but it's not to the extent of a North America or Europe canopy, if that makes sense. Um, our canopy here is pretty sporadic just because of that cedar blight that came in that wiped out majority of our trees. Um, so what we are left with is an invasive forest that typically does not grow to be that tall. Um,
So there's one question here about pricing. Uh,
yeah. So there is a variety of drones on the market now. I would say that the ease of access to these drones have definitely come down in price. Unfortunately, for the U.S. and North America in particular, the U.S. has banned the use of DJI drones and important DJI drones that are the newer varieties. So going forward in the future, the main brand that is accessible to pretty much everyone around the world is DJI. That is like the easiest and cheapest drone you could buy. They will no longer be able to be imported into the United States. So that will offer a bit of a pricing difference between that. The drone that would be a little bit higher on the price point for a US manufactured drone would be Skydio. And they start out about 20,000 versus a drone that's about, if you're getting all the bells and whistles for the enterprise DJI one, they're about 5,000. So it's a very big discrepancy in that price, just to be a US made drone.
well, that's a big one.
Yeah. There are other models out there, but now specifically DJI is locking their enterprise level, but like their SDK, I should say, behind enterprise level. So what does that mean? When you're using a platform like Drone Deploy, you would have to use um, a specific drone to fit that requirement. So since DJI blocks the regular drones from communicating with Drone Deploy in different apps, you have to either use the onboard app for that drone and then import it to Drone Deploy, which is what we do kind of now, or you have to buy that enterprise level drone in order to cooperate between different softwares. So price points can start at about 5 to 6 grand for the enterprise level drones. You could get away with the $2,000 drone and then just manually fly it or use the onboard mapping software of that drone and then import to your software. Um, Hiring out can have its challenges unless you specifically request a certain ground sample distance, a certain height. It can be left up to the drone operator. If you're going to hire it out, you should come with a couple of questions and a couple of examples prepared. So you could be like, I want this area flown at a lower ground sample distance because I want this more accurate data. But if I have fields and fields of just open long, I don't need accurate data for that. I don't need to measure uh, the fields in particular, but I want to really measure these trees. So when you're hiring it out for that work, it can be a little expensive. They do typically base on the flight time, the mapping processing time is another expense. And one more would be acreage. So how large the area that you're flying. It just depends on the operator. Typically, about hiring out is around 150 to 350 an hour, from what I've heard in the United States. And that number can be varied based on where you are as well within the United States.
Yeah. And of course, going back to that checklist, make sure you actually give clear instructions of what you're looking for. We've had to
Yes.
talk to some gardens who've got something back that they basically have problems utilized for the purpose they needed, because so that's part of the story why we have this webinar as well, so we can help people to ask the right questions. It's really
Yep.
cool.
And if you have any other questions, feel free to email me on the side. Yeah, you could use Drone Deploy without an RTK unit and without a base station. Your data will just not be as accurate. So for instance, the drone that we were using before our RTK drone, it was about a 36 feet GPS truss. So that means 36 feet in either direction of where you measured or where you put a point down. The latest drone is about 0.10 feet GPS trust, so much more accurate. So when you use a drone and do not fly with RTK, your data is going to be skewed in some way. It just if you're trying to fly the drone for a base map, it can be useful, can work. But that it comes with a trade-off of accuracy as well. So yes, you could definitely do it. But I would not use a drone map that was captured without RTK to do any planning, any location data planning for sure, because you don't know how accurate that map will be. So say you've mapped out an area, that data is still going to be skewed about 36 feet as well.
Yep.
The discussion of DJI enterprise versus non-enterprise level. Yeah, Waypoint Map we've used before. It can work, but some of these drones now are locked down. The non-enterprise drones, you may need a little bit of workaround to get them to talk to other apps. But I've pretty much the drone that we were using previously is no longer supported. The batteries on it have degraded so much, so we've abandoned that non-enterprise level drone. But yes, there are other tools that you can use to get the kind of same images. And you also can manually fly and take images on a non-enterprise level drone to then create that map as well. Cost for an RTK unit for the base station is about 2,000. For the actual RTK model is probably about 800 for the drone that we have now. But if you do get an enterprise level drone, they do typically have the base RTK unit on it. So I can show you. So they would typically come installed with the RTK units on it when you are getting enterprise level 1. So it comes pre-installed with this RTK module. But you would still need to buy that base station or that rover for this module to connect to the satellites to talk to it in real time. And that is about close to $2,000 landed for us in Bermuda after shipping and customs and everything. Yep. There's also RTK services, like web-based services that you could connect to. I'm seeing it in the chat. And that is either hosted through your country or your county or your cities. We unfortunately do not have a network RTK is what they call it. We don't have a network RTK here, but on Drone Deploy itself, they actually do have RTK service, a network RTK service that if you are in North America, and I believe they are trying to expand to Europe, that they will use baked into the software. So you have that RTK capacity. You just need to have that RTK module on your drone for that to work. There's another thing that there is called PPK, that's post-processing after the drone is landed. That is a little bit more in depth. I don't have any experience with that just because we have that RTK module, so I don't need to do corrections in PPK. And that's can be done through either some of the apps like Pix4D Fields, for instance, has that, and other web-based softwares as well should have that.
Yeah, fantastic. There's one thing we didn't touch on, but we tried to put that in the article. That obviously based on where you're based, there might be very strict regulations on flying drones, and it's a very hot or complicated topic, but it's just worth reminding that some places anybody could fly, some places nobody can fly, some places you need a license, etc., etc. So there's all variations under the sun in how you might need to relate to that. So keep that in mind before you go and shop. If you might not be able to run it. So, but there we go. So I'll round off now by just saying thank you to Nick and to Naz for some very inspiring presentations, and thank you all also for joining us today. And then we'll post this in an article for you to use as a resource. The checklist points from Naz and from Nick, trying to collate that into one sort of cookbook for how to get drone maps into your own collections.